Hello and welcome to Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Delighted to be joined today by Philip Miller from Solidatus. Philip, how are you?
I'm doing very well, considering. Thank you very much. How are you?
Considering is just the word at the moment. Isn't it?
Consider all being locked up at home for months on end. Yeah.
And you were talking about this before. You're itching to get yourself back into city life and a glass of something after the working day at some stage.
Well, I'm a city creature. I was brought up in the city, and it's the longest I have been out of London business trip. In fact, it's now the longest I've been out of London since I was a baby, I think, out of the city. So
well, I think we didn't miss the commute, but it's as you can see, we're back in and have been popping back in at various intervals all the way through. So we've got our biggest crowd back in the office today, but still a few empty desks to fill up as people slowly start to edge back into it. But look, we can talk about all of that and your plans on that in the near future. But look, you've got an amazing company. There's some really interesting stuff that's going on with you guys at the moment. For anyone who hasn't heard about you and the team, can you give us a little bit of background to the company, please?
So we started, myself and two friends started about 8 years ago. We essentially wanted to build a software company. That was a single-minded aim. And what we were going to build was the different matter. So it was one of those things of, we had a business plan that said, okay, we'll work and we'll look around and see what the problems are in the marketplace. And I think people try too hard to fix get a solution to something, but actually find a real world problem first and something that wasn't being serviced. We had a couple of good ideas, and actually the one that stuck with us most was one that we'd experienced in our working lives, because we were still working, pretty much every day for one bank or another. And we saw that intellectual property, so essentially we're an intellectual property company. We store intellectual property. Intellectual property was being lost in translation, or it was being shared badly, or it was being lost because programs of work had people coming in and out of companies, and kind of you would find yourself in a situation where someone had written something, they put it in a SharePoint, that SharePoint had just got lost and dusty, and then the next year you had to go and rewrite the whole thing. So I was doing some really cool tech, and people who looked me up, I worked at HSBC for a while, and I really enjoyed my time there. I can't say that enough. I was able to build some really cool tech, but it got to the classic situation of any technology you can imagine where it got expensive. Tech's always expensive for the business. But I was looking at it and going, but my tech isn't expensive. I built it to be really generic, really flexible. Actually, everything you'd want. It was agile. You didn't need to, redeploy it every time you needed to do upgrades, all that sort of stuff. And the epiphany, because epiphanies come to you in waves, right, was that I was employing a lot of people who were just relearning what the business was doing all the time. Things would change in the business, things would change in other parts of the big tech organization. And this isn't exclusive to HSBC. HSBC was doing really well, actually centralizing and understanding stuff in various places, but still there was a lot of change that was happening in the background. And my business partner, Philip Dutton, was having the same issues around, he was doing upgrades of trading systems or migrating one trading system to another. And he was he was asking so many people what they were doing and how it was working. So the second of the epiphanies was that actually there was no tech that would solve this solution, this would solve this problem. And we got ourselves into a place where we thought, actually, we can see a way of like collaboratively team working over really large organizations or really small organizations, storing that intellectual property and making it really, really simple for people to use. And everyone said, okay, but there are governance solutions out there. We're like, it's not governance. Governance is one thing. It's a very static thing, governance. You make a law, and then the politicians who make the law don't go out into the streets and then try to police the law. It's the police that police the law, right? So they're the operational front end, and software engineers are like that against the governance in organizations. And we were like, we need to empower the people doing the work to update the documentation rather than having some intermediary or third person on a Chinese whispers trail trying to do it. And so we came up with this idea where collaborative working around intellectual property actually gave you good governance and transparency for free. So you had all these people doing the work. Why did you need to employ another 50% on top of it to kind of write behind them what they were doing? Sort of one of those ways where you see little notebooks behind dictators. You actually want them to be documenting as they went on, but actually using the documents themselves as well. And so we came up with this concept that you could actually kind of draw a picture of what you were doing. That picture could be really specific. And those pictures became models. Those models became sort of a living, breathing blueprint of an organization. And yeah, we came up with Solidatus. Over the course of a couple of years, we tested it with our mates. In the city, we're quite well known in various organizations. We've worked in quite a few places. And our mates really liked it, and they gave us some suggestions. And eventually, we sold something, and the world changed. We went from 4 or 5 people to we're over 30 now. We're still a private company, and we want to grow to like 50 people this year, and it's extremely scary. I'm gonna have to get an assistant.
Surely not. There's some space behind you there, I think. Bit of Atlantics out there.
Well, no, but it's scary to think that this is. I mean, it took a long time. It felt like it took a long time to start, but we knew we wanted to build a proper piece of software. So the software is real, it's tangible. It's not like an MVP which someone's trying to sell a tail off the end of. We solved a real problem, and that's gone from strength to strength. We've sort of gone up the, if you like, the food chain within companies. We were trying to sell to our peers originally, so we were sort of operational software engineers, maybe development managers, whatever. And now we're talking to CDOs and CIOs, and we're talking enterprise deals with very large banks. And you're like, oh my God. And that just
very grown up.
Well, yeah. So there you go. In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, that's where we get to. So a wonderful journey. And as you say, look, I think one of the telling things there that you said right at the very start is how you described it was with a couple of friends. I love that sort of story, because it's a business there that's about 8 years that you've been running, as you say.
So building a real, I think people underestimate what it takes to build a real piece of software. It's 3 to 4 years. You can't just come up with 10 lines of code and then suddenly it's solving everything. It doesn't work. It takes investment to make something robust and enterprise ready. And we were on the cusp of enterprise ready when we sold the first piece of software. And the people we sold it to were a tier 1 bank, and they were very forgiving of the fact that we weren't quite polished on the kind of the administrative side of the application, but the front end, the thing that did the business that they bought and liked was robust and good. And now if I look back at those 3 or 4 years since we made that sale, we are so much further past that now in every respect. It's a smashing piece of software to use. And it kind of would have, if I'd have been back at HSBC, it would have saved me tens of millions of bucks. And that would have just been my team. And it's sort of, we're real practitioners, and we really have passion about our problem, because it made us look bad as technologists, right? Technology isn't bad; it's the implementations often that hurt.
Very true.
Intellectual property around that implementation. You'd never go and rebuild a wall in a house without checking the blueprints first. But we do this in IT all the time, right? I'm just going to whack that framework out and put that one in. Oh gosh, some Chinese hackers have just taken over because it came off GitHub. I mean, those sort of things are what we want to prevent in companies, amongst other stuff.
And this sort of I guess development and growth of the company seems to be founded on looking at a problem that you guys lived through, solving that problem, which is a real problem that as you say can save significant money for the people who you're selling to. So it seems a very obvious sort of play for you to do that. It seems a very obvious buy for an investment bank to do that. But you sort of intimated it there before about how long it takes to get to that sort of stage and to become business ready. How was the procurement process at that sort of stage? And have you seen that change a little bit more? Because I'm hearing a lot more of thawing of procurements in investment banks and over recent months. And I'm wondering if that's going to be some of the legacy that we see.
So I think you've got to look at the world in several places, right? So you had... if you go back to the late 90s, early noughties, you probably had quite a lot of procurement in-house in an organization. And then you went through a phase of, things like Sarbanes-Oxley drove quite a lot of this. You shouldn't have the guy with the purse just making procurement decisions. They needed a sort of decoupling of concerns and people checking and balancing. So the procurement departments became bloated, and they looked to people like Computer Center, who were providing lots and lots of facilities to do procurement on their behalf. And you get these like these software clubs then. So you go along, it's not quite an app store, but people like Softcat or Computer Center or a QBS, for example, who come along and then they say, actually, why don't you have a contract with us, and then we'll have a contract with someone else? And it's almost, money for nothing for them, because you lose a bit of commission. But when they're done really well, if you're a really small player like us and you manage to get one of these distribution agreements, you can sell to the biggest companies in the world, and you don't need to spend an awful lot of money on lawyers. So what happened with us right at the beginning was that we had this tier one, big international financial services company, and they wanted the software. They'd seen it in use. In fact, it was my business partner was there. He lent it to someone who lent it to someone, and la 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 la. They realised they didn't have licenses. They came to us and went, "Oh gosh, you're a bit small, but hey, we have an innovation function, so an early innovation function. And what we're going to do for you is we're going to go to our vendor manager and we're going to tell them that they must onboard you to one of the distribution arrangements." Best thing that ever happened to us, because immediately we could sell to half the world, certainly all the financial services companies in the world. And we were tremendously fortunate that a very, very large bank went along to a distributor and said, don't muck them around, don't screw them on commission, because some of the software catalogs will take 40-50% off you in terms of your revenue. And we got a really very clement deal, and it also came with things like payments happening almost immediately. So no 90-day wait for your money to come into the bank, and the bank's used it for 3 months and says, oh no, I don't like it very much, and then doesn't pay. No, it was a cast iron guarantee to get cash flow. And we upgraded those relationships over the coming years, and actually, so we can vend to a huge amount of people without any paper. We've now got to a place where we are sufficiently brand recognized that we don't need the distributors as much anymore. Like in an emergency, we can use them, and we have a very good relationship with our primary distributor, QBS, who are brilliant. But the reality is that we can now enter a procurement discussion, because we're at a certain ticket size that the procurement departments now we fall into the insourced part of procurement. And so we've been very lucky in that regard. As to what's been happening, so that's kind of the old story and the middle story of the distributors. Now, what's happening right now, I think, is that particularly we're noticing it around government. So we have a couple of government plays going on, is that there is a real desire not to have red tape. And a lot of the intermediary kind of vendor frameworks are very, very, very slow. And there's a certain drive to not have that happen. And that the vendor arrangements do actually take commission off you. So both sides are losing. One side is paying for the vendor manager, whichever way you look at it, or maybe both sides are. Yeah, that's no good for anybody. So you could be losing. I don't know. We were probably losing more than £100,000 a year as a reasonably small company to vendor managers. I mean, it's good business for them. And don't get me wrong, they had their place for us. We didn't need to spend money on lawyers at one point in time when we were really small. But now I think we've moved past that.
Yeah. It's an interesting sort of play, isn't it? And it's the stranglehold it strangles a number of different businesses, particularly around the fintech space, who never get the traction to put good product that can add real value in front of people, and that sort of set up, and through design or accident or good fortune, it's there are ways of doing it that need you need that sort of I think run of fortune at some stage.
Yeah, the client-led stuff for us was the way that we got the most value out of that whole process. If we'd have gone to them, they'd have looked at us and gone, "You're a couple of people. There's a lot of risk there. No sales particularly, or maybe you've got a sale that you're trying to negotiate with." And I think we would have been stung for a higher level. But having the client so generously go to them and say, don't screw them over. We need them to survive. We need them to get the majority of the cash that we're paying. The procurement department is going to take too long. I think that was really helpful. So it kind of vindicated what we were doing as well. So we weren't just going and hawking a product and saying you can buy from us. We got a problem which was significantly important for the organisation to actually put effort into it.
Okay, so apologies there. We had a slight technical interruption as Zoom failed me for the first time during this series. But as professionals, we roll back in. So apologies for the new angle, and Philip, apologies for the interruption there.
Right.
Look, really interesting to hear the story of everything that we've been talking about there as well. but I'm also really interested to see today's market. And look, you mentioned and intimated just before about how this is a period of growth. You set yourself some aggressive growth targets for, in terms of headcount, in terms of size and scale of the business, etc. How's the pandemic impacted that?
So a really interesting time for us. So we were extremely lucky at the beginning of the year. We have always been fortunate with deals coming in at just the right time for us, and we managed to get some. We got the deal that you would have dreamed about at the beginning of a calendar year, and it set us up quite well for growth. I can't deny it. It was timing wise couldn't have been better for us. And we had always planned then so private company, we don't intend to make lots of profit. There's no point in that. We have no one to impress except for ourselves. And so we've always invested everything into growing the business. So whenever we've had money, we've always reinvested it. The long and the short of it is that we wanted to double in size over the course of the calendar year, and we could afford it now because we'd saved a little bit, and then we had a good license fee. We did what a software company should do, which was we covered our costs, and immediately everything is reinvestable. So we were very lucky at the beginning of the year. Then the pandemic started, and we started. We travel a lot, particularly to Asia. So we saw, I think at the beginning of the year, the Asia guys liking up. Perhaps we were a bit more sensitive to it because we have an office in Singapore. We were a bit sensitive to it earlier, so we kind of canned our international travel. And like a good tech company, we're all laptop based. We picked up our laptops and we walked out of the office and we said goodbye to each other. We went home, and we kind of looked at it and went, well, what's that going to do for us? I mean, apart from the obligatory sorting out and getting of screens to keyboards to people and all sorts of things, we started to notice a sort of what we saw as a sort of phenomenal uptick in incoming sales. And from the point of view of as a company and how we have been selling the software, we'd relied on people using the software and then spreading, occasionally changing jobs or changing companies and taking the software with them. We've always been an inbound sales organization like that. We work very hard on our mates who are very well placed, who grilled us really hard on what the software should do and put us through our paces and battle hardened us before we started selling. And then we relied on people who used the software to kind of resell it for us, because they would switch jobs and they go, I need a bit of Solidatus in my life. Come over with us. And, we gradually grew. And as I say, we always covered our costs at every single point. But we have a website. We had a website that was a lot less well-formed 3 or 4 months ago. And as I say, the traffic on the website started to kick up. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, we think. Firstly, we're selling a product which kind of replaces the coffee shop conversation. So that conversation where you have after saying in the office, oh God, I wish I knew where this piece of thing is, or I wish I knew how that worked. And someone would overhear you and go, okay, no, it's all right, Toby, this is how it works. You've got to reboot your computer and get your phone out, and that's fine, and it'll work, right? And yeah, okay. So those conversations are not happening anymore. And we kind of a piece of software that replaces the coffee shop, the water cooler conversations. So if you want to know how something works, you can now ask Solidatus. So that was good. So we were doing something that was more appropriate in terms of where people were working from home, not being overheard, not being able to have those cool, conversations that save you hours of floundering around documentation. So that was one thing. The second thing is that although we didn't have a huge amount of content on our website, I mean, it was fairly rich, but we didn't have a huge amount. It was content that was really, really relevant for what people want to do at the moment. So people are finding themselves in a position where, they're having to reorganize huge amounts of their data, particularly government, in order to service things like grant giving or, track and trace. All of this sort of stuff's going on in the background. And the data sources were okay when you could blunder around and you had enough SMEs in the room. But now you've got a lot of people wanting to self-serve because they are working at home. So our content was very relevant for this scenario. And I think you add that to the final thing, which was nobody's doing marketing conferences anymore. London Fintech Week became virtual, and let's face it, didn't really happen much to everyone's not necessarily shock, but sadness. I mean, we couldn't go to meet people who we wanted to meet. I'm not going around having a cup of coffee 10 times a day with different customers, or that glass of wine you were talking about earlier. Proverbially, I'm not going out on the golf course with people. There's none of that kind of soft, not bribery because that's the wrong word, but that soft contact that big companies like the IBMs, or you can pick the other ones in the world, have thousands of sales guys just going out and making those contacts, and they jealously guard their contacts in companies. What we saw was that people, so our search on our website, everyone tracks a little bit what goes on their website. The search hits from Google were going through the roof. We were going from thousands of hits to tens of thousands of hits on our website. And so again, one of those epiphanies. The whole playing field was leveled. The internet is democratic. You do a search, if you've got the best content, you get to the top. And in some degrees, it doesn't matter how much you buy AdWords or whatever the other equivalents are. Yes, you'll get that little ad bit at the top. But if your content is really good and if people think it is relevant, it'll be linked to, it'll be cross-referenced, it'll bubble up to the top by itself. And so we know we get to the top of the rankings in quite a lot of things now. Couple that with the fact that we actually, one of the things that we first did with our cash was get marketing involved. So as our marketing machine's going up, so we are now the first among equals, right? So we are coming up at the tops of searches. And so any given day you could see, we might have had a couple of approaches a week at the beginning of the year. And now that's up to many a day. And our sales team, which is growing, one of them, he said to me yesterday or the day before, he said to me, I was at a big software company and I didn't get this many approaches a day as you're having. And so this democratization of the playing field, this leveling of the playing field, and I refer you back to I really want to go back to the office discussion. I'm not saying let's have a pandemic forever, but it's been really good for us to get our brand up.
Yeah.
And another thing I think is, and one of those things that's striking, is that these things, these Zooms, Teams calls, whatever, I'm seeing many more people face to face now. And we're having a little jokey conversation at the beginning. It's not over the coffee shop, but it's, in some ways, I feel like I'm getting to know more people more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those sort of things have helped immensely. And I can tell you absolutely, I would have expected to have had a lot of phone calls. And I would have always been on my computer doing a phone call over, FaceTime or whatever on my Mac or my iPad. Nowadays, those phone calls, those old conference lines have died, and I think it's extremely unusual now to get to a situation where majority of the people are not running video at the other end of a call. And this is going to change the world forever. There's no question it's going to change the world forever. Now, we're seeing a slightly different thing in Asia as it happens. Asia has still got, it's got many, many countries. And although they're very sophisticated in terms of their tech offerings, for example, one of the things they have, and it is a nuance. It's not a cultural difference. It's just a difference of the region. There are many more languages out there, or dialects of languages, and not that there's not a big culture of running video in Asia. So I go to an Asian meeting, and I'll find it very rare that people will run video. Extremely rare. Now that might be because their internet isn't so good, or they're embarrassed about their small houses or whatever, or small homes. But either way, without being able to see someone's lips move, in Asia, it's a lot harder to understand and get your message over properly. And it's not about English or anything else. It's literally about that face-to-face contact. So in Asia, of course, you would have expected to go from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur in 45 minutes on a plane, right? You'd have gone to Kuala Lumpur for 2 meetings and come home again. Now there's none of that travel. So I think the Asia economies, at least from our perspective, are moving a bit more slowly to recovery, whereas we haven't missed a beat in terms of work in the UK and the US. I really couldn't stress that enough. We haven't missed a beat. Summer is our slow time. We're going to close a number of deals in July, which we don't do in summer. There's 3 months we never close anything usually in a year, but we will be closing deals this month and next month. And that's, maybe that's a sign of a business that's picking up, but for us, we always plan for a dead summer. And it certainly the whole of business has changed. And we've definitely, as I say, got a piece of software that people are, they're suddenly going, oh my goodness, it's so easy to use. It's so quick to get results out of. We have a county councillor they're organising child welfare. And it's a desperate reason that they're having to do all of this, because they think it's going to be quite bad when the children go back to school, and all the sadness is behind this. Kids kept at home. We've read it all in the news, and we don't need to go into it. But they said that we've put them in such a better position, procured overnight almost. Everyone says government takes a year, but almost in immediately. It's been so exciting this time. This level playing field. People have gone out and done research, and they've said that's a good product.
Yeah, and that's there's obviously I think it's probably inappropriate to say fortuitous in a time like this, but there's businesses there that have managed to provide solutions that have made this absolutely the right time for something like this to happen, and very clearly that's what you've done. The interesting thing for me is how you've positioned that to add real value at that sort of stage. It's one thing having a product there that adds value at this sort of time. It's another thing to use marketing efforts to replace sales efforts. This industry has been very, very much about the trade show for years and years and years, and as you say, meeting in pubs, restaurants, going playing golf, etc., etc. All of a sudden, that's wiped out. Some companies have got this absolutely right. We're running an event, this week to talk about this and how the playing field is that much more level. But tell us a little bit about how you've maximised your marketing. Tell us about how much how you've managed to rise above the noise, and how you've managed to turn this into an advantage for your business to increase that sales pipeline and come out stronger and better from it.
So, I mean, without a doubt, we recognise that marketing is that. It's a profit center, right? Marketing. I think my business partner, he's been bashing on about this for a long time. I guess I'm a bit more in the tech sometimes, but he's absolutely right when he says that marketing is a profit center. You get marketing right, and you're gonna spread your word further. Now, I think one of the things that we were doing is, we are a small company. We had to maximize our digital channels perhaps more than a bigger company did. So we were already on the curve of pushing that digital channel. And we've been really lucky about some of the things that have come out of this, the silver linings. We were in a position to ramp up. Not every company. I sadly know too many companies good companies that have just not made it, or they're finding it really tough right now. We were in a position to capitalize on that. We've made investments, and we are making more investments in that area. We've also been enormously lucky. I think, things like podcasts and videocasts and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot more of these going around, and it comes back to the previous point. People are looking much more and doing their research online much more, which means that the viewership is going up for these channels, and they are high quality in many respects, because you're not going to a conference and seeing 3 things that you're interested in, 30 that you're not. You're picking and choosing. You're consuming it at leisure. My sister she's a TV producer, and she'll tell you quite happily how the world of TV is consuming changing from broadcast TV to consume on demand TV, and that they're having to change and rebalance the way that they're working, because you can't work out what your viewership is for 2 or 3 weeks sometimes.
Yeah,
and that's fine. Or you could make a show and it's not going to be broadcast for ages, or it doesn't get broadcast at all. We've got channels now that that are purely digital, and I think looking at the way that my kids are consuming their school, and they're very young, they are being brought up with on-demand teaching. So the teachers are recording things online, and they're going in and they're consuming it. So that's marketing, for educational marketing, right? So those kids grow up. That tech, that way of consuming their lessons, will change so much in 10 years' time. Again, the amount that will change for the way they consume the information they get. This is just accelerated. I mean, there's the meme that's going on. There's the GIF or whatever that's going around right now. It's like, what changed your IT strategy more? Was it the CIO? Was it fintech? Was it whatever? Is it coronavirus? Right, and tick with coronavirus, because we had to become sensible overnight. Things cannot take years anymore. They had to be done immediately. Otherwise, the organisation is going to die. Very fascinating, and to capitalise on that, I think for us, we're doing everything right. We just accelerated it. I mean, right? We were on the right curve, and we accelerated.
Yeah, I think that sort of sense of acceleration has been a sort of probably the most common theme that I've had all the way through these. I think this is rapidly approaching, if not the 50th, and rapidly approaching the 50th lockdown series of Fintech Focus TV. And it's been a really interesting sort of curve to see how many people have seen that sort of. I think someone called it the sort of petrol on the bonfire of innovation in the technology world. it's so prevalent. But I think, as you say, there's businesses there who've been able to maximize that, and there's been businesses there that have struggled a little bit more with it and gone by the wayside. And I think a lot of it comes down to those original things there of, is your product saving money, making things easier, and are you able to to put it in front of the right eyes and adapt. And one of the key things that you're talking about here, and very, very clearly, is your business as a still relatively young business in its space has managed to adapt and are reaping the rewards from it. I'd love to see that. I think it's fantastic to see companies who are able to take that story and as we've said all the way through, and things I love talking about, which is turning negatives into positives. And it's very easy to talk about all the tragedy, but there is lasting legacies here that we can do things a hell of a lot better from it.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with that more. And from our perspective, again, the way we built our product was to actually build the product to make it complete. We weren't coming to the market with something that was unprepared. And fortune favours the brave, goes the saying, right? But fortune favours the fortunate as well. You have to have a bit of timing on your side, and if you can be positive, and aspirational through these sorts of times, and to a degree survive, because that's the thing too, then you'll come out of this sort of, I think if you look back to 2008 and then go back even further to 2001, you see these blips of events now compared to what we're going through in reality. The companies that come out of this are going to be the ones that had real purpose and that they had real solutions to real problems. The ones that are like a little bit fanciful, I think, are the ones that should struggle. But again, you do need to be in the right place at the right time. And as I say, we were on the right curve, and we're not blundering around like a ball in a pinball machine. We are trying to accelerate in that right direction. And you talked about friends forming a company. I think the other thing that we've had that's been, and I'd like to say thank you to all the guys in Solidatus. They all know who they are, and in the future, someone's looking at this and you weren't here at the time, you will fall into this category, I'm sure. We've made a company of people who genuinely get on in each other's company, and that it's actually been rather hard for us, not just to not go to an office, because I'm sure a lot of people care about going to an office, and I'm quite sure that forms a significant cadre amongst our lot. But we really enjoy each other's company, and so actually having casual calls over Zoom and things like that have been quite easy. And when we have variously sort of met at a distance, if it's not me throwing a screen through someone's window or something like that, we've all got quite emotional about the fact that we are a group of people who really likes working together, and that's all of us. Every single person in the company is a friend to every other person. I think that sort of being able to pull yourself through and notice when someone's feeling a bit down at home, and then just making that extra. Lots of companies will say the same thing, but I do very strongly believe that we've grown in a way that has actually insulated us from the worst of this. We've had starters. We've grown by 30% during this time, but not one of those starters has been someone that's been unknown to us as a group of people.
Yeah,
and so
that's interesting, isn't it?
It's the trick as well. So we've got to grow more. And where will we draw that line of not having met someone and hiring them? It's going to happen very soon. Yeah, but you hope there's a good depth there, that people can say, don't worry about Phil. He's grumpy in the mornings on a Thursday because he's had his thing Wednesday evening, and it's just, whatever, blah 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 blah. And they
can stay clear of Phil on a Thursday morning.
Maybe not Thursdays, but something like that. And there are two Phils in the company, so I'll leave that one. You can imagine them talking about. So.
All right, so I think that's the power of culture is a really important thing, and I think this is a really interesting aspect. That there's a number of companies that I've spoken to who have accelerated and grown through this, and that sort of onboarding of people in such a bizarre sort of way. I was speaking this morning to someone who's 2 months into a business and knows the two founders but knows no one else in the business physically, and it's a unique set of propositions to be able to keep what's obviously been very, very core to your success, your growth, your structure of your business, to have those people fighting for each other, and then to add people into that. But the beauty of this is I think when you've got those strong cultures and you've got people there who are working together, you can absolutely do that and continue to do it. And when people do eventually re-emerge, the stories I'm hearing is just how good it is to have those people and meet them, and how much easier it is for them to be part of the family from as soon as they're physically in the offices together.
So important to feel that you've got friends you can turn to in a workplace. And when you do, and it is true, our company, probably there's two of us that bind everyone together in terms of actual physically knowing someone. And you need to have more. You need to have more depth to your little network, and even in a small company, of people you can have a beer with, or you can ask, or you're feeling a bit tearful and you don't want to go to one place. I'm not suggesting that that's happening, but you do need to have that safety blanket. One of the things, if you don't mind, I'd like to call out that we've managed to continue doing is we've got a little women in tech thing going, and we've managed to keep that going. We've had a really superb girl working with us over the summer who reasonably was going to go and do a different gap year, but she working with us for part of the gap year. We were able to extend it over the gap year. And I also think it's very important for my fellow fintechs to think about how we can start giving back, because there's a whole generation of kids out there who are going to be really, really challenged over the next couple of years. And for those of us that are doing well, I think we've got to, what's the word, forbearance. We just have to make sure we continue making those investments in the younger kids as well, the ones going through university and the ones who want to become enthusiastic in our world. I think we've been good to continue going that. We couldn't do it as much as we wanted, but we're very passionate about helping education, helping kids in education, but also women in tech as well. From our perspective, these are things that we could have stopped, but we didn't. We continue to make those investments. So that's just a little call to arms to other fintechs out there. If you are growing, think about keeping the young kids coming through, because they're going to need it more than in the next couple of years.
I think I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think there's the danger is this loss, and we saw it in 2008. And it wasn't necessarily 2008 itself, but it was a couple of years afterwards where you were looking for this sort of lost generation of people with 2 years experience, and suddenly they weren't there. Yeah. And it was I did a lot of work with BBC Radio at that sort of stage, speaking to people who've been long-term unemployed in youth education, and it's a real responsibility. You're absolutely right to try and get that right. And it's very difficult to virtually onboard graduates and put a graduate training program in play. But I think some real thought and agility around that is going to be one of those things which really helps as a catalyst for fast growth over the next couple of years, as much as growth now.
One of our grads is in Malaysia. We've got a guy who started from Thailand. I mean, they're people who should be in the UK. They should be sitting next to people at desks, extreme programming with them or whatever. But I just don't think you've got to still just recognise that is if we don't invest like this, we will all be poorer in a couple of years' time. No matter how well you're doing individually, the society itself needs this sort of investment. So that was my little soapbox bit, and thank you for allowing me that bit. But I feel very strongly that we've got to do this, especially if you're talking to growing fintechs. That please go and find some kids to mentor, and don't forget them, because they're our future as well. You'll be employing them in 5 years' time as full-time members of staff, and you'll need them, and you'll need those grads. And if we don't let them flourish now, then they'll get this, they'll just fall out of education or something even worse, right? So
absolutely agree. It's been a fascinating conversation talking to you. There's going to be people here who are really keen to sort of find out a little bit more about the business and get in touch with you as well. What's the best way of doing that?
Well, you can get in touch with LinkedIn, of course. So this is, I guess this will be on LinkedIn. So I guess it will be tagged in some way, or Solidatus.com. Yeah, so careers@solidatus.com if you want a job, because we've got lots of jobs going. We're very lucky. Or www.solidatus.com for all of your metadata management needs, of course. Yeah.
Well, who can resist that? Philip, it's been an absolute pleasure, and finding out a little bit more about the business. Apologies about the tech interruptions at various stages through that. We're in a brave new world, and we have to roll with these punches as they come through for it. But
it's good enough for today's program. It's good enough for you. Don't worry.
quite right too. Listen, thanks to you all for watching, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks ever so much.